Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Grafton Select Board meeting for March 8th, 2022. First order of business, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Would please everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I just have one comment that I would like to make tonight before I open up to the public. I want to personally thank the Grafton Police Department for its amazing response over the weekend, which I'm sure we all read about in the news. It can never be an easy situation going into such a stressful event like that. But I wanted to personally thank the Grafton Police Department and the surrounding police departments for their actions in seeing a peaceful ending to what could have been a very unfortunate outcome. But I didn't know if any of the other members would like to comment on that as well, or.
You know, great job. Always proud of the Grafton Police Department, men and women of the Grafton Police Department. Always.
Agreed. Yep, I agree with that too. Just thank you for your service to the town of Grafton, and as you know, as Peter stated, it could have gone in a different direction without great leadership and training of the officers involved, and you know, help from other municipal services and other communities. So thank you for all involved.
All right. Any Chief? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, it was a little tricky, but everybody got together. They pulled it through, and you know, state police, Shrewsbury police came down. Their full department came down to help us out. State police brought the air wing and all that. You know, some of the assets. You say I saw some comments. Overkill. There's no such thing as overkill when it comes to public safety, and we'll keep doing what we do to make sure public is safe. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Anyone from the members of the public would like to speak? Anyone from the audience, if they would like to use the raise hand function, they may come in. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. All right, let's move up. So first on our schedule tonight, the Select Board would like to discuss outdoor dining for 2022, as well as just, you know, in addition to that, just, you know, what's our role, alcohol licensing, etc. Ray, I'm going to hand this over to you. This was an ask that you wanted, and I just wanted to let you open us up.
Yeah. So, if you haven't visited our restaurants that have outdoor dining, you know, you'll get to do it again this year. But our restaurants in town, fantastic restaurants. They do a great job. They bring in a lot of people. They bring in a lot of tax revenue, and it's just great. The issue that we run into is the outdoor dining. Now, outdoor dining it went from, you know, from COVID to get people to show up at the restaurants and then move on from there, and now it has exploded. So what I wanted to bring up to the board was that I would like to see the outdoor dining extended for until 2023, until we can come up with a plan and a process to make this outdoor dining permanent. And I know that you know, some of the restaurants take parking spaces and take spaces that is not in their liquor license. And I really would like to spend 2022 with the planning board and the Board of Appeals and police, fire, and building, and work on a process so that the restaurants in town can continue the outdoor dining the way they have been doing it. Now, I know there's some issue. Again, I'm going to bring up the parking. There were issues where you had a tent in parking spaces and things like that. Guess what? We worked through all of that. We did. There were no parking issues. There were no traffic issues. There was nothing. So I would just like to see outdoor dining extended until 2023, until the respective boards and committees can come up with a plan on how to do it and help out the restaurants.
right, thanks, Ray. So with us tonight, just to reiterate, we have zoning enforcement Rob Berger. We have Chief of Police Chief Norm Crapo. In addition, we have Chris McGoldrick, our town planner, and also with us tonight we have our Grafton Planning Board. So I just wanted to just introduce, make sure everyone had some introductions here, and if anyone has any comments or questions, would like to go first in this response to this request.
Yeah.
Colleen.
No, I think that's a good idea, and I don't think we necessarily have to wait until 2023 to get a little more comprehensive with how we want to allow this. Boston has a 2022 temporary outdoor dining program with guidance. It's about 22 pages long. It really outlines a lot of good stuff in here, and I really think we should use this as a jump off point and tailor it to Grafton. It gives us a lot of, language that we've been looking for, reaching for. It really just describes, what a barrier is, insurance requirements for these places. It limits outdoor entertainment, will no longer be something that would be in the outdoor spaces. Now the indoor spaces, the entertainment can just go back inside, so that deals with the neighbors that were upset with noise. Things of that nature that to just go over and look at and then tailor to what we want to see here in Grafton. I can send this out to everybody and we could start working on that and maybe try to put it together for this year as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Doreen?
I'm personally in favor of the idea, but I'm very interested in hearing from our building inspector, our chief of police, any member of the planning board or planning director on, regulations that you see would have to be changed or reasons why the board shouldn't move forward with this idea. I mean, obviously from an economic development standpoint, it's a great idea to help our local restaurants, but we're having this conversation with you all today to find out, are there any hurdles that we need to discuss?
Quick segue. Anyone else on the board? Matt?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm in full support of this. I think it's a great idea. I do want to be a little bit careful though about saying that we want them to allow them to continue doing it the same way. The intention originally was that we were providing some relief during COVID, to struggling businesses and whatnot. Doing that as a temporary measure is substantially different than a permanent sort of permitting process. So I just want to be a little bit careful in saying that, we want them to be doing it the same way, because as we think about this as a permanent feature in Grafton with across the different restaurants, there may be some challenges. So I do want to be just open to input from the various boards and committees and departments in things that they may have concerns about. So that's all I have to say.
And just before I get to you, Mr. Berger, I just wanted to comment too that, when the inception of this outdoor dining, when this emergency occurred, I really saw, to your point, Ray, a lot of restaurants become very creative in generating more interest in their restaurants, allowing increased capacity. And I understood why, due to a safety concern. But I also said, a couple years ago now, that it would be great to see and examine if Grafton could adhere to this somewhat permanently, whatever that looks like. So I too would be in favor of seeing Grafton adopt some policies or guidelines, or however the permitting process would have to go, to allow for seasonal outdoor dining. Obviously, with the concerns and the limitations that were sort of discussed tonight too, I would be amenable to seeing what those would look like, or getting some input and guidance from the various boards that would be involved with this going forward. So, all right, thank you for that. Bob, you had your hand up first.
I did. Is that Bob Berger or Bob H?
Bob Berger.
Okay. So yeah, I'm in favor of outdoor dining. I think it was great on Covert. And really, it's a process that has to go through the planning board, and sometimes it has to go through the zoning board of appeals to modify whatever permits they have that are operating under those conditions. But the issue that I have, which would be worked out between the planning board or the zoning board, but I want this board to be aware, is parking. I mean, when we were in the emergency and nobody was inside the restaurant, you had a restaurant that had, let's say, 100 seats. With those 100 seats, you have so many parking spaces per butt that sits in that chair. So before we weren't inside the restaurant, but now everything's lifted. You'll have 100 people outside and maybe 50 people inside. Well, let's reverse that. You'll have 100 people inside. Now you have 50 people outside, and now you have to have the parking to support the extra seating. As long as they have the parking to support the extra seating, this is great. But we have a couple restaurants in town that really, you know, the one on Worcester Street, they have 154 seats inside. They have just enough parking for that 154 seats. If we throw any more seats on the outside, where are they going to get that parking? I know that's nothing that this board has to work out. It's all going to be in front of the planning board for that particular case, but that's the issue that we're working with right now. And that's, of course, my biggest concern, because I don't want to have to be the zoning enforcement officer that counts how many people are inside versus how many people are outside, because that just won't work. And that's basically my concern on this whole workshop.
Doreen?
Colleen.
Colleen, I'm sorry. I thought I saw
I'm
your
back.
hand. Doreen,
I'm back now.
I moved over a seat this week.
To that point, when I was reading the Boston guidance, they have different zones kind of outlined like that. There's an on-street cafe zone. There's a sidewalk cafe zone for the restaurants that you are concerned about for parking. Maybe their outdoor is limited to a sidewalk cafe zone where the parking is not impacted. So I think I can send this to you for consideration and a look at, and to modify to fit for Grafton, but that could help you out there.
Well, I do hear what you're saying, but Boston's a little bit different. I mean, let's just talk about Worcester Street. Let's just talk about the Union House. The Union House, you can't park on Worcester Street. There's only so many spaces in that particular parking lot. So, Boston and Cambridge and Brookline, the North End, the South End, they all really don't have parking regulations for their restaurants, because they're all, inner city, and they park wherever they can park. Mm-hmm. But when we come to a town as like Grafton and Ashland, we all have parking regulations based on how many seats you have or square footage. And if we don't have shared parking or reserve parking, then if we're going to allow this, now we have to go into the bylaw and figure out how we're going to change the bylaw to address your concerns right now.
Any other questions or comments? Chris, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, so I just want to thank the board for their comments on this, and I try not to advocate my own opinions, but I also would encourage the restaurants and outside dining to continue for this year under the temporary permits that we've been doing. I think there's a lot, not just the economic development, but simply the vibrancy of a community to see people out enjoying nice weather, and establishing that community vibrancy. I think the outside dining is a major contributing factor to that. I am working on developing a more permanent solution, looking at the zoning regulations for that. I'm tentatively looking to get onto the spring warrant if we can get through that. And I've been talking to some of the restaurants as they come in, asking about how we're going to do this process moving forward for planning board. So the temporary process, as you mentioned, is not a perfect process. I don't think it was intended to be that way. It really is that stopgap measure. And I think moving towards a more permanent solution will give the businesses more confidence in the process, and give us stronger regulatory tools to address the concerns that do come up, and to provide better solutions. In terms of that, I think there's concerns initially that were brought up that never came to fruition with the outdoor dining. There's concerns that did come up for locations that I think can be addressed. So I think moving forward, each it'll, each business, writing zoning to fit each business is never gonna be easy. So each business is gonna have to, each restaurant is gonna have to fit into those regulations, some way or the other. Some businesses will probably have a really easy way of doing it. It's gonna be challenging for others. So I, would encourage, as we write those regulations, the restaurants to be involved, and I've discussed this with them. So the more involvement they have, the better we can tailor those regulations to fit their needs, and to work with, not just the concerns that the public has, but how do we fit that, and allow these businesses to thrive. So that I'm hoping to have a presentation for the planning board on this coming Monday. If not soon thereafter. So really trying to push forward for the spring, if not the fall. I think there is some way to move forward. Thank you for bringing up the Boston guidelines. It's actually a document that I've been drawing some inspiration from, but also looking at some surrounding communities that have started to incorporate more permanent solutions, and how do we tailor those to the context of Grafton. So that is forthcoming, but again, as much as we can get, not just the boards, but the restaurants and the public involved in this process, the better that the outcome of those regulations will be when we go to town meeting for the vote.
Peter?
Great.
Chris, wouldn't you need two? You could write a bylaw that says, okay, you're going to build a 2,000 square foot restaurant. You're going to have 1,000 square feet of outdoor, and you have a regulation to that. How do you take that in a bylaw and then relate it to an existing business that says, okay, you can have so many square feet of outside dining, and I'm asking the question: can you use both? So an existing restaurant and I understand a total new restaurant. You want outdoor dining, that's before the planning board. We need a regulation that goes to that. But the existing restaurants, how do you write a bylaw that relates to both?
Right, and I think that's where for each business that that'll be challenging for some, in terms of how we write it. So what I've seen some communities surrounding that I've done is they do as the outside dining is an accessory use to the existing restaurant, and they allow up to 50% of the square footage of the existing restaurant. What that does, some businesses may only want to do 25%, but that puts a maximum, so you're not having very large outdoor dining taking up the entire parcel, and then a very small, hot dog shop, if you will. I think the site context of each restaurant is going to be different. There's going to be some that will not be able to meet parking requirements. They won't be able to put the 50% of outside dining and keep the parking that they're required, because the parking is based, I believe it's off of tables and current table capacity. So that'll be part of where each business will have to look at how they can fit the tables and the seating capacity and what they have available on their existing site to fit that. There may be some other way that we come up with the restaurants that may fit for some of those other sites, but we'll have to look at that as we kind of hash out that process.
So just one more thing, Peter. So the pub in Highfields, they've had outdoor dining since they were built.
Right.
So was that done through the site plan approval process?
Yeah. So currently outdoor dining is it's mentioned in a couple places. Actually, our village mixed use has some for that specific zone has some really good language already in it that I think we can potentially expand out to other zones or just overall to town. But even Dunkin' Donuts down the street has some small outside dining, so it's not explicitly prohibited in any case. But and so if a restaurant wanted to put outside dining on an existing green space, they could modify their existing site plan to do that. But again, looking at things like parking spaces, if they're removing parking spaces to do that, we'll have to look at the parking counts and how that works. So I think it was the post office pub recently is looking at a more more permanent solution with the grass area that they recently put in, and that's probably an easier solution than some of the other restaurants may have in terms of what they've been doing on a temporary basis and making that permanent.
Matt and Colleen.
So, Chris, what is the current parking? This seems to be the theme, I guess, tonight. Our current parking requirements, what's the basis of those requirements? And is there flexibility with, looking at some of the restaurants that are going to have challenges with parking and I want us to be taking a partnership approach to try to help as many businesses as we can. So I'm just wondering what the basis is for our current regulations.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the zoning. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it's a ratio from seats to parking spaces that are required. Usually at like 2.5 seats per parking space.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Berger?
Bob may have a ratio up.
Yeah, it's one parking space for every 3 seats. And then for your maximum shift, it's 1 for 1 for your employees.
So that's the ratio, but what's the basis of that ratio? Like, do we care that the parking's going to spill out over into a couple of other businesses or a neighborhood or, I guess that's my question. To go to Boston, they don't have those regulations. People park where they can. Is that okay for Grafton?
So that ratio sets the parking minimum. Businesses can always provide additional parking, and generally do if they want their consumers to be able to have enough parking to go to the restaurant. So those minimums set. This is the minimum amount. You can put it below. Not every restaurant is going to provide. You can't guarantee then that you're going to have sufficient parking for the business. So you could have that spillover. Which with potential detrimental impacts. Some communities, more urban environments, typically can get away with where there's more walkability, buses and things like that. They may be able to do away with parking requirements entirely, and just allow the businesses to do that. I'm not saying that's what Grafton wants to
Sure.
the direction we want to take, but I think we could look at if there's some changes that can be done to right size it. Businesses can always look for a variance for that process. That's a very high regulatory threshold. That would go to the ZBA. They do have to prove a hardship in terms of the existing lot, and so that would be a really high regulatory threshold. That might be something that we look at. There's other flexibility in terms of reserve parking, shared parking, which we don't currently have, but some of the parking regulations can be modernized to fit some of those contexts. In terms of flexibility, one of the things I've seen is the international engineer standards, ITE standards, which allows for it's a more comprehensive parking calculation per use, and sometimes that provides flexibility for businesses to use more shared parking. And referencing that could be beneficial.
Mr. Hassinger, before we get to you, Colleen, did you have a question? Then down to Mr. Hassinger.
Yeah, so my question's more about what this board's in charge of, which is the outdoor entertainment license. And we issued those on an emergency kind of idea that they have the emergency outdoor entertainment license. Are those extending past April 1st, do you know? And is that something that we should be talking about and considering, because that's in our scope to be talking about?
Well, that and liquor.
That and liquor, yeah.
Right.
Oh, you're at.
I'm asking the question. I don't know who has the answer. I mean, because it
I-
sounds like planning is going to take care of the parking component.
Right.
So these are the things that we should be talking about is the liquor license and the outdoor entertainment part of it.
So in reviewing the Boston guidelines, it does look like they are petitioning to have that extended. That's the city of Boston. I don't know if that would be specific to them. I would imagine if that was granted, they would do that, statewide. But that is it seems like that is
For the
something
liquor,
that,
right?
that
Because in
yeah,
the Boston
right, for
guidance, the
April
entertainment
1st,
is
the
saying
governor's orders.
no outdoor entertainment.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's Boston. Do we
Right.
necessarily want that here? I don't know. We might want to continue outdoor entertainment.
Right.
So,
Right, so it is set to expire and there is no extension currently, I'm aware of. So you would only be able to grant it up and until unless we had a change in zoning to allow different use, correct?
So the liquor license, my understanding is fully on the select board. I'm not sure if the governor's orders allowing that for outdoor laps on April 1st. I'm not sure the authority if the select board has the authority to extend that on their own. That's something that we would have to look into.
Real quick, Chief Crapo, did you want to address the liquor permit side of things, or did you have another question? Because I want to hit Mr. Hassinger first before you do.
No, I was just going to touch on the liquor and actually the entertainment. Liquor license, we didn't say much when all this began. We want businesses to thrive in Grafton. So, we try to focus on liquor and off-premises consumption and all. So I think one thing we have to look at for sure, first of all, for the liquor is the off-premises. When you have an outdoor venue, it's a lot easier to walk away with something if you don't have some type of barrier or barricade around the outdoor dining. Same thing with minors obtaining alcohol. I've seen it before, and we just want to make sure if this is going to become permanent, that there is a more permanent structure, not necessarily for season, but something that's up there that's going to prevent people from being able to reach in and be handed something and walk away. So containment is our concern. And as far as outdoor entertainment, we're the ones that get the calls when when these venues have outdoor entertainment, and we get residents, and it's not even right next door to these venues, but could be close to a half a block away, and they're complaining about the noise, the music, whatever. So I think that's something that's going to be addressed. And what Colleen was saying about keeping the entertainment inside, I'm all for that. You can still have a good crowd at a venue, but doesn't necessarily have to be outside, because then it affects the neighborhood. And as you know, this past summer before that, we get a lot of calls, and there's no solution. So either you're going to have the entertainment or you're not. We don't have a noise ordinance per se for something like this, so that's something that has to be addressed. And that kind of ties our hands without that. And just one other thing, I'll go on. It was talked about by the board, I forget when, but about putting up barriers for safety, especially if we're going to have these outdoor venues in parking lots. How close do we let the cars get to them? Like I said, I think we've been very, very tolerant with that to support the businesses. But if you're going to be doing this on a more regular basis, you have to consider what type of barriers, and I'm not talking about planters or plastic cones or something like that, because it could be an accident waiting to happen, as it were. And I think that should be considered when you're thinking about this. And Boston, looking at Boston, Boston doesn't have a lot of restaurants or pubs or bars that have parking lots. They have maybe a little space on the side, but they don't have parking lot. They park wherever, as it was mentioned. They park in garages. They park off street someplace. But a lot of these restaurants don't have that situation. So that's not really an issue. I spent a lot of time. My daughter was living up at the seaport, and I saw the way it runs up there. And you have to take that into consideration when you're looking at the Boston regulations. I believe there's other towns, and I don't know if MMA or would probably have something that we can look at for best practices for the towns that are allowing premises to have an outdoor venue with a parking lot, to see what they're doing. Just suggestion.
Thank you. Mr. Hassinger?
Yeah, it's been long enough. I may have forgotten. Let's see. The chief mentions, well, they park elsewhere. The the problem in the cases that I'm thinking of is that there isn't any elsewhere. It's not like the city where you go up the alley and find a place or something. It's either the road, and we're not going to have people parking on the side of 122, I don't think, or it's in the neighbor's lot. And the case I'm particularly thinking of, the neighbor was very unaccepting of that. The only neighbor took action, I think, against people parking in his lot at one point. So that's not going to be real easy. I was also concerned at that, particularly at that location, but maybe the others, about whether we really had enough space for the cars to move in the remaining parking lot spaces. Entertainment, not only are the entertainers, should they be inside, but the sound they're making should be inside. In other words, don't put some loudspeakers out in the outdoor area to take them out there. That is certainly the parking and the comes under site plan, and for the cases where they have a permit that came through the planning board. In some cases, there's a special permit also, which is part of this. One of the considerations for special permit is compatibility with the surrounding area, and that can come back again to the music and whatnot. Not to mention, I don't know a real good case, but you could have parking beginning to be a complaint, so you got to keep that one in mind. But otherwise, I think right now they should be. Hopefully, they can be doing what they did last year, put in for permits now, so that the process will play out by the time the weather is ready for them, and not wait and hope that we'll get zoning or get whatever put in time for the beginning of their season. That's good enough.
Thanks, Bob. Anyone else have any further comments? Justin, come on up, have a seat.
All right. You don't have to sit that close.
So, mainly for Mr. Berger, you did mention when thinking about the parking and having to count seats inside and outside, you made the phrase, I believe it was, that's just not really possible for you. So I'm wondering if we do any permits or any bylaw changes that say X number of seats total, including inside and outside for parking, what is that just not possible for you, or what would you recommend? How would you, from an enforcement standpoint, how would you recommend us going about that?
Well, it would go through, obviously, the planning board, and what I'm saying is it really shouldn't be based on, if you have a restaurant that has 150 seats and you're going to give them a special permit and you're going to put a condition that you can only use 100 seats inside and then you can use the other 50 on the outside. That's what I was referencing, that condition would kill me, because I'm not going to go in there and count how many people are inside versus outside. So I think that, we have to come up with some sort of zoning regulation for parking that allows whatever you have outside to accommodate, whatever you have outside for parking has to accommodate your total occupancy for the inside and the outside. That way I'm not counting who's in and who's out. Did that make sense to the board, what I just said?
Yep,
I
sure does.
think it did. I'm going to just
Okay.
rephrase just to make sure that I understand it right. That you'd expect the total number of seats for patrons for the restaurant, inside and outside combined, to be not more than what they have available for parking. Is that
Absolutely.
okay? Thank you. That's all I had for now.
You're welcome.
Did you have something?
How did you know? But just to go off of what Mr. Berger was saying, I know he has a specific establishment in mind. if we did limit the entertainment to indoors, they might not want to extend as many seats outdoors anyway, might solve the problem. You know what I mean? Where they just keep a majority of their seats indoors because that's where their entertainment is, and that was kind of a big part of their business model, I guess. So it could solve that problem.
And Mr. Chair, may I say, I'm not picking on any establishment. It's just that's the establishment that is so tight for parking that it is it is could be the problem child. I'm not picking on that establishment. It's just there.
Mr. Hassinger? And then
Yep.
Mr. McGolder.
Well, we'll recall, we covered the base this last year by saying, basically, you couldn't use as many seats indoors. Basically, you had to not use the 50 outdoor seat, whatever it was. The 50 outdoor, when you're using the 50 outdoor seats and you have that space taken out of the parking lot, then you have to not use 50 of your indoor space seats. I don't know how to write a bylaw that says, yeah, I'm not sure whether Bob wants to say you just count all those seats, the 150 and the 50 and 200, and give it a permit to run that way because they don't have the parking spaces to fit that. So we covered it with a condition this last year in the permit. Basically, they're too successful. That's really the problem.
No such thing.
So it sounds like to me that, through the logistics, it sounds like, the planning board has some of its own processes to go through, working with Mr. Berger and his office and making sure that they, whatever's being proposed, is agreed upon, but done so in a fair and equitable way, right? On top of that, just besides, outdoor music and outdoor liquor, licenses and stuff, that does flow through the board, on a case-by-case basis. That's not something that, I know we grant it, like, I think annually for indoor, but if people want to apply for it outdoor, at this point, they have a method of doing so. Besides that, Chris, I know you had your hand up too, but I just wanted to know, like, you guys can deal with parking and figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to know if you had anything in addition.
Yeah, I just want to mention and build on that where I think, just going back to how each business is going to have their own challenge in terms of fitting whatever regulations we come up with. And that's not to mean that we're picking on any businesses or trying to exclude certain businesses. That's just to have a more permanent outdoor seating. That process is necessarily going to be more stringent than the temporary process we've had. I think moving forward, what we can look at after we've instituted a more permanent process, businesses will be able to use that to get approval and not need to come back each year. We can at that point then retire the temporary process and no longer provide that, or we can potentially look at that and see is there a way that we can adjust the temporary process or even roll that into the zoning to allow similarly a more relaxed standard if for this style of putting tents in an existing parking lot. If businesses do like that, maybe we continue that process and do an annual review like we've been doing, but clean that process up a little bit as well. Like we've kind of been hashing this process out and learning as we go. But that would be separate from these permanent solutions. So there's opportunity there too. I don't think that the answer is necessarily no if we do institute a permanent process.
So I've got a question just following up with this. I mean, this all started when the state came down with some emergency provisions and relaxed some of the standards and so on and so forth. I mean, does the state need to extend these provisions in order for us to utilize some temporary measure? I mean, is that something that we need to have in place in order to do this on a temporary basis?
So yes and no. My understanding as a home rule state, if the state regulates it, we have to follow that, and it supersedes zoning. If they don't have provisions in place, we can regulate it as essentially as we see fit. There's more caveat to that, but that's the rough and tumble of it, from my understanding. So without the regulations in place, so similarly, we mentioned Highfields and Dunkin' Donuts already having outside dining, so we can regulate that, and don't necessarily need those provisions in place. I think one of the questions will be the April 1st and the outside, how the liquor license applies to this outdoor dining. I don't have that answer tonight, but that's something that we'll have to review to see how that works.
Doreen and then Ray.
Question for Chris. So you spoke earlier about warrant going on Maytown meeting. Just to clarify, is that for temporary or for permanent?
I'm hoping for a permanent. So
Okay.
What I would encourage, similar to how we've been doing it, the temporary process, either the ZBA or the planning board, depending upon the existing permit holder, or permit granting authority, I would encourage them to follow that process again this year, and to use that process in coordination with the health department, police and fire, and their own processes. So there's a lot of different kind of pieces that fit into that businesses have to coordinate on their own to get these outside temporary permits open. But I would encourage that, and then in the Springtown meeting, I'm hoping to have some adjustments to zoning that might push us in a more permanent, or provide options for businesses to seek a more permanent solution.
Good. And just two more follow-up questions to that. One, in terms of this board's, decisions on liquor license and entertainment license, if this were to pass or fail at town meeting, how would that affect this board? Would that be something that we'd have to look at those items again based on town meeting vote? Sounds like yes, right? So that's something we're going to need to consider. And then just lastly, what else can our board be doing to support this action at this time, if any?
Yeah, I think this workshop is helpful. It gives me some direction. I've already picked up some comments. I'm happy that we had all the other kind of regulatory authorities to discuss, and that kind of helps me to frame, at least these initial kind of draft regulations to fit some of those concerns. But just continuing to stay involved and to provide that direction, I think, is the best thing for us to make sure that this process moves forward smoothly. So,
Good. Thanks.
thank you.
Ray.
Well done.
I'm sorry.
So my goal in the board's goal was to try to, help the restaurants and come up with a plan. So what I'm hearing is, and I know this, that we can extend this outdoor dining. We can put stipulations on that outdoor dining, like Jersey barriers and things like that. We can extend the liquor license to fit into that outdoor dining on a temporary basis until everybody comes up with a plan, and then that plan's implemented, and then we go by it. That was my goal, and that's it sounds like it's worked out. And what?
I didn't hear that about the liquor license. I thought we
Oh,
were
no,
looking
we
at that a little bit more.
No, we control the liquor licenses.
We don't need to.
So we can, if somebody comes in and says, I want to have liquor in this tent, just like a 1-day beer and wine, or I want to have liquor in this tent from April 1st until September 1st, we change that. We can alter that liquor license to make that happen. So that's us. That's all us. That's not planning or anybody else.
Oh no, that is. But I didn't know if there was something we needed to hear back from the state first. I thought Boston was petitioning something. I thought we were waiting a little bit more to know if we
unless-
can actually do that.
Well, no, we can extend, and Evan, correct me if I'm wrong. We can extend outdoor dining. Just us. We don't need the state. If the state extends outdoor dining until September of 2022, then we don't have to do anything. but this board can extend outdoor dining just on our authority.
I think that's what I asked earlier
Yeah.
for them to look into.
Yeah, I
Well,
didn't
yeah,
get a
so-
hard yes on that.
So just to clarify so whether it's, so the temporary process we've been using currently, either the planning board or the zoning board of appeals would be they would be the authority that can extend those temporary measures for the outside dining only. The liquor license is under the control of the select board. We'll have to review how on April 1st that plays out. I'm not sure how that would apply to service of alcohol outdoors. That may be that the outdoor dining can continue, but service of alcohol needs to remain indoors. Doesn't mean you can't get food outdoors, but maybe the liquor is not allowed to be served outdoors. So we'll have to look at how that plays out. The select board may have the authority to temporarily extend that even after April 1st. I don't know. We'll have to get more information.
Okay.
Good.
That'd be good to know. All right.
Well, I mean, if somebody files to, extend their liquor license further onto their property, they come before us.
Right.
We say yes or no. So, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, again,
Yeah,
great
provi-
meeting, but the process is moving.
Yep.
And that's a good thing. That was really my goal, that I wanted that process to stop moving.
Yep.
And that's great.
The only caveat is you just can't issue a liquor license in a zone where liquor is not permitted to be sold.
Right.
Right. That's only where you're limited by local zoning. So.
Yep.
Otherwise, I think you can do what you want.
As long as it's on the same piece of property.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you don't want it in your front yard, Ray?
Oh, I do. I won't tell you about some of my parties, but police have been there too, but
I was thinking maybe
You know where the
we could-
chief's
maybe-
gonna be driving by.
he goes. No, he goes to
We
the
just
party, so.
meet next week, and then we don't meet until after April 1st. So does that affect anything? Do restaurants need to come to us by next week to make that happen? Because things kind of disappear and we're not going to be available.
It's an excellent question. Colleen's back.
The way I understood it is
Yeah. Sure.
they file for the permit, it's gotta go through the planning and
Right.
ZBA stuff first.
First, right.
That-
Yeah.
that-
So we should be
that-
okay.
That doesn't affect us at all.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think once they approve, whether ZBA or planning approves their
Dining.
temporary dining site plan, then they apply, I think, to that point, whether they want to do outdoor entertainment, outdoor liquor. And then to Ray's point, I do believe both of those items do come for us with feedback from the various department heads.
So-
sorry, one other caveat about liquor, from a member of the audience. So you can approve outdoor liquor, but nothing goes into effect until the ABCC approves it as well.
One more thing about liquor,
Sure.
margaritas put weight on.
There you go.
If the businesses though are gonna have to go through that permitting process, for April 1st, we should give them a heads up.
Yeah, so we've spoken to a number of businesses. I think we have actually two on Monday's, potentially two on Monday's agenda. So they are
Good.
And we'll reach out. And obviously, any of the businesses, it's, I can provide the application that they gave us last year if they want to build off of that.
Yep.
But
Got it. Good.
Good.
Great.
Any other further questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for coming in, Chris. Planning Board, thank you very much, Chief Bob Berger. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. I see that Mr. Hill has joined the meeting here. I would invite ZBA if they want to come up here and sit around here to be part of the discussion. So next up, discussing the LIP process in terms of friendly 40B developments. With us tonight, we do just introduce everyone. We have the ZBA in attendance, Dan Hill, special counsel, and we have Mr. McGoldrick here. Well, you can sit in that chair.
Peter, come on.
Hey, Tom, you want to sit here? You can sit here.
All right. Well, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. I want to just say thank you for reaching out to me about setting this meeting up. I think this is important. Grafton's at a unique crossroads here coming forward. And with us tonight, we have Dan Hill, Grafton's special counsel, works with zoning and building.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of order.
Yes.
Do we need to call our meeting to order? Because we are in a public meeting. at this
That
point.
is completely up to you, sir.
I think that's the way we should do it, isn't it? So I think the chairman needs to call.
I don't tell other members how to run their meetings.
So I'll entertain a motion to open the,
I don't think you need a motion, just call it to order.
oh, all right. Call this meeting of the zoning board of appeals to order.
All right. Thank you. Okay. All right. So tonight, there's been several discussions about on the select board with questions around the LIP process, what that looks like. Given just some background on this for everyone who's listening, there is some unique situations that Grafton is facing here in potentially the near term that might affect this process. So we're here tonight to just discuss what is the select board's role with the LIP process, what guidance can be provided to us to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and we're taking these applications in and we're providing areas that are appropriate for us, but at the same time also discussing with ZBA and just understanding just what that process is. So it's really just an open discussion. I don't have any answers. I've got more questions. So I guess who would like to maybe go first? Chris?
Sure. So I think for the select board, I think we kind of touched on it a little bit in the previous meeting, but the select board's role for the LIP process is primarily taking a first crack at the proposal. So they'll present the proposal to the select board, and the select board, what the applicant will be seeking is a letter of endorsement that then gets submitted back to the applicant and to DHCD and goes through the DHCD process. After that, the project still comes back before the zoning board of appeals, similar to a regular 40B project, and has that process play out. So the select board's role is kind of that initial round of looking at impacts and looking at the overall 10,000 foot view of the project as it's in its conceptual stages, and is this a project that fits the context of Grafton, or is this a project that the select board cannot endorse for whatever reason. And so I think that's where the review is. I know some of the members have asked, looking at putting conditions and what can we do in terms of conditions on these projects at such initial phases, knowing that you can't render the project financially unfeasible. You're only looking at concept plans that may change during the ZBA process. So how do you implement conditions? I think one of the first things that the select board could do is looking at, and it's a typical condition that the ZBA looks to either include or not include, is a local preference, which simply means during the lottery process, Grafton, if it's included, Grafton residents get bumped higher in that lottery process. They get the initial round just for Grafton residents before going into the regular lottery process for those affordable units. The select board, we can go into more detail about that, and if that's something that the select board wants to impose early on in the process or not. I've also reached out to DHCD. I'm hoping to have a meeting on Friday to discuss with them and just see, are there other communities recently that have passed LIP proposals, to see what the select board in those cases did. Were there conditions that we can consider that other communities have put on in that early stage. So hopefully I'll have a little bit more information after that Friday meeting as well of what other communities may have considered.
So, any questions, discussions from Matt?
Yeah, I have a million questions. What is the applicant? So they file their application with DHCD. What artifacts are they required to file with that?
Sorry, what was that?
What are the artifacts that they're required to file with the actual LIP application? So they're going to submit an actual complete application with DHCD, which is going to start a clock where we, gather public input and whatnot and review, and what is it we're going to be looking at?
Yeah, so for the select board process, they'll come with the concept plans. I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't believe there's a clock from when they submit, because they're just looking for the letter of endorsement from the select board. So they'll present the plans and go. The select board can review that through their normal discretion, and either issue the letter of endorsement or remain silent. They can simply just no longer hear the project, or they can submit a letter of opposition. With that letter of endorsement, that goes towards the DHCD process, and my understanding is that it's an easier threshold for them to get the project eligibility letter from DHCD to move into the 40B process with ZBA, which will have additional materials that they have to provide for the ZBA. But I believe that for the select board process, you can request additional materials if you see fit to, if that's information that's needed for the select board's endorsement. That would be under your discretion.
Colleen? Endorsement.
Once we give the endorsement, the project goes off. It does come back to us again at some point in the process, does it not?
Not to the select board, so it would go
No.
to the zoning board of appeals.
Okay, so this is our one and only time to give any input.
The select board could
This-
still weigh in on the ZBA process, but
Okay.
it would then be under the zoning board of appeals authority.
Dorian?
So if the board, so first of all, thank you. This is already very helpful. And I think a list of conditions would definitely help this board, just to kind of give us some guidelines in making the decision on endorsement, opposition, or doing nothing. I'm curious if our decision changes the process with DHCD or with the ZBA at all, depending on that decision. Or can the applicant still move forward, and like how much weight is there if we decide to do nothing versus if there's an opposition versus if we endorse it?
Right.
Yeah.
So my understanding is the letter of endorsement then may provide somewhat of a enhanced process with DHCD in terms of issuing that project eligibility letter, getting them before the zoning board of appeals more quickly. In terms of conditions that are imposed, I may have to ask Dan Hill to weigh in on this, but I believe the conditions imposed from the select board process then follow over to the zoning board of appeals process as well, so that would be incumbent on their process. So that's kind of the.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, Dan, did you want to weigh in on Mr. McGoldrick's
Sure.
comments?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's important to maybe take a step back just to explain how projects come before boards of selectmen under LIP. And it's, I think most, if not all, of the projects in Grafton in the past have not been LIP. It's been more the conventional route. And basically the developer has the option to choose which subsidizing agency they want to go through on their projects. And every other project in Grafton has gone through a more conventional agency at the state level, typically Mass Housing or Mass Housing Partnership. So these are unique. A developer can choose to not do a conventional subsidizing agency process, but instead go through this LIP process, which is which has been referred to as a friendly 40B process. And in a sense, the way it works is that the town is essentially becoming somewhat of a partner with the applicant to go to DHCD with a joint application for project eligibility. So it's really, it's intended for projects that basically advance the town's objectives to produce affordable housing. And it's often used in projects that towns themselves initiate. For example, I know you've had a couple town-sponsored developments which haven't been 40Bs, have been 40R, but that would be an example of the way you'd use the LIP process. The way the LIP processes work in other communities, developers do like to use it if they feel they can get the town support, because it makes the process a lot smoother. As Chris said, it's more streamlined and it has the imprimatur of a local endorsement on the project. And developers are often willing to negotiate terms and mitigation in order to get the endorsement from the Board of Selectmen. So if you're interested in entertaining endorsing any of these 3 projects that are in the pipeline, what I would recommend is getting into a posture of figuring out, A, do you like the project, or do you think there's a project there that you could approve? And then really engage with the applicant robustly to think about what kind of design you'd like to see on the site, how many buildings, how many units, what kind of units, rental ownership. All those things are on the table. And most of the time, applicants are willing to negotiate and to work with towns on those issues. Typically, a LIP endorsement is memorialized by a contract, and a lot of towns will have a memorandum of understanding or something similar, which lays out what the developer is agreeing to do in exchange for the LIP endorsement. I've seen in some towns, developers are willing to donate money towards a sidewalk fund, donate funds for other municipal services like a fire truck or something like that. So like I said, I think anything's on the table, and I think the best approach is actually to take each project on its own merits and think about, if we're going to approve a project in this location, is there something in that location that we should get as mitigation? And then you can really enter into negotiations with that applicant, typically offline, not in the course of a public meeting. So it is a very useful tool for towns, especially for towns that are looking to get to their 10% threshold or a safe harbor. And I know that Grafton is close, and I think that's something that you all should talk about as well. That you've got the Pine Street project, which I believe is 317 units. That's going to give you that safe harbor for 2 years, and then you've got only a small jump to get to 10% after that. And so that would be something to think about. Is there a LIP project that could get you over 10%? I know there's a potential project for the old DPW building that could get you over 10%. And once you're over 10%, you don't have to entertain any future 40B projects. You can approve them, but you don't have to. And you can approve them on your own terms. You don't have to grant all the waivers that developers will typically ask for. So that's something also to consider when you're talking about these LIP applications that are coming before the board.
Thanks, Dan. Matt, did you have a question? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how binding those requirements are, the conditions are, when they're sort of passed on with the endorsement. And so I heard donation. That was something that I'd be interested in, potentially donation to the Affordable Housing Trust. I think we need to be looking for ways to replenish their funding. Would things like sidewalks and this is just a general question, I guess, to anybody who wants to answer it, but sidewalks and bus stop locations, things like that, are those appropriate kinds of conditions? My sense of it is we want to stay away from things like that. The ZBA would be looking in depth, and once we get a final site plan, things like stormwater management and whatnot. So, you know, I guess what we're saying, it really is anything's on the table potentially, as long as it's not really going to impact the feasibility of the project. Is that about right? So another one that I thought about was maybe, you know, in the housing production plan, there's a call out for not just affordable units, which would be at that 80% AMI, but actually a lower threshold where we would, you know, could we ask the developer, for example, to be providing units at 50% AMI instead of 80%? You know, would that sort of thing be appropriate?
Yeah, all those things are appropriate, and frankly, anything's on the table because this isn't a situation like the zoning board is in, where the zoning board has to be careful about what kind of conditions it imposes. you can ask for anything, and the developer can give you anything. Because if you don't agree with, if you don't come to terms with the developer on a LIP endorsement, on a MOU, the developer will just go and go to another agency,
Yep.
get the project eligibility letter, and move on in that direction.
Sure.
So I would encourage you to think about with each project what would be useful to the town. Could be a sidewalk, could be a donation to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It could be a statue in town hall. I mean, it could be literally anything.
Before you go, real quick, I had Chris, then Colleen, and then Mr. Yeomans had their hand up. But you're all set? Yep. Colleen?
It seems like now would be the time to drill down on the HCA and really figure out how we want that to be worded in Grafton and present them with that. And that gives us the guarantee that Matt was just talking about, and it can build in metrics for down the line when we feel what the impact is to all the services when you have 300 units or how many ever units. I would like to do that.
Just so for your information, Colleen and Hopkinton, large developer, provided this, basically this kind of community host agreement, which was basically additional funds, to your point, Mr. Hill, like, you know, to fund whatever it is, right?
It was like schools and public safeties when certain
Yeah,
metrics were
had some conditions in it, right? And says, hey, I want to put this 1,000-unit development in Hopkinton. So that's what she's referring to. So I didn't know if that's similar to the LIP process too, or that's the same type of binding agreement. So basically, Hopkinton went through the LIP process. That's essentially what that agreement is. Is that?
Yeah, that's a post-community agreement. That's just a different terminology. It's the same. That's what I'm talking about. MOU, post-agreement, whatever. It's basically a contract that you agree to endorse the project and help the developer. The developer agrees to do what it agrees to do.
Thanks. Mr. Yeomans? You had your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. And Dan, hello, Dan. Nice to see you.
Hi, Bill.
I spent a bit of time just looking at a variety of towns, and I think that the LIP process gives the select board a unique opportunity to try to develop a deal that with a developer that is, it has to benefit the developer, obviously. You know, they're in business to make a profit. But from what I've gathered and what I've read, that the select board has the unique opportunity to sit with a developer and, as Dan has said, to do any condition that you want to put forth. And if in that negotiation with them that they decide that they want to do it and they're willing to do that, be they sidewalks or, you know, you want a sidewalk going down from the center of town to Dunkin' Donuts, then that's a condition that you can impose on it. The other things that I've read, and by the way, we do have a 52-page document regarding the LIP process that's under the website, the town website, under the affordable housing. Now, that 52-page process, if you look at that, that's a hell of a lot of detail, and this is an older one. I don't know when it's been updated. But if you go through it, and there's probably 3 or 4 pages on the front that really direct you as an executive board to be thinking about ways in which you can interact with that developer, and you sit around and you negotiate the deal. The deal is that, and I look at things a little differently, and I look at the town having the Affordable Housing Trust has $1.5 million in their bank account at some point. The Affordable Housing Trust has been given at town meeting the land, the old high school location, which has a deed restriction on it to provide affordable senior housing. Now, that, I look at that as, is there a way for you as a board to deal with the developer and to look at those kiddies, even though they're under the umbrella of the Affordable Housing Trust, but is there a way to incentivize a developer to do something better for the town? And if they agree to it, then you go forth and you basically develop that package. It goes to the planning board. They go through the routine, and it goes to the planning board with your blessing. It eventually ends up, that project in its development would go to the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, that development goes to the ZBA, and it goes through the process at the ZBA, but the ZBA gets a letter that says, oh, by the way, ZBA, this has been all pre-approved. We sat down and we negotiated this. What can you negotiate? I've seen examples, and by the way, the little town of Hudson has 2 pages that talks about the procedures for their LIP program. And on the required benefits that they have, some of the things shall include innovative site design, a percentage of affordable units in excess of the normal 25%.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go, and building density does not maximize development of the site. Unique things, other benefits, and again, this is their snapshot, but some of these conditions in here are in this 52-page document. And I didn't read it. I just got to the first few pages that I said, okay, that tells me enough. It's very similar, as Dan has said. So I think it's a hell of an opportunity for you and the select board to be soon, in another month or so, and Doreen and Peter, you can be in the audience advocating for affordable housing.
Thanks for that suggestion.
Yeah, and, I think that it's a unique opportunity. And if in your negotiations, when you say, and I like to think of the land that we have and the money that the Affordable Housing Trust has, is there some way that you can incent a developer, either a for-profit or a nonprofit? And I don't speak from experience. I don't have information about block grants and the federal monies that might be available. I do think that the Affordable Housing Trust has brought on a couple of very good people that have a background in those fields that I think will be helpful to them. So if the developer does not like what you're doing, then they leave the room and they say, no, we're not going to put in that sidewalk. We're not going to, and I've looked at some towns where they require in their negotiation that the developer pay a certain amount back to the Affordable Housing Trust for the market rate units that they're building and selling for $550,000, where they want 10% of that price coming back, or 5%, to be coming back to the town to funnel through affordable housing. And if you get to the point in your negotiations where they say, hey, you know, this is not a good deal for me, they leave the room, they file for a 40B comprehensive permit, it goes to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we do the same thing we've been doing, you know, for a number of years with developing affordable housing. Here's the thought that I have in my mind in coming to this meeting tonight. I think the town of Grafton has done a yeoman's job on developing affordable housing for families. And, you know, we've had some communications. I think Bill has pointed that out very, very well. in the number of units that have been produced for families. But I don't think much has been produced for affordable housing for seniors. And I'm not talking the senior that's going to sell his place for $750,000 and then, be trying to get into some. But there are seniors in this town that do not own homes, that would like to remain in town, but can't afford to find a place to live. So if there's a way that you can take the creative money with the Affordable Housing Trust, and, I've never favored taking the restriction off of the deed of the old high school site. We gave it to the Housing Trust for senior housing. That's what it should have on it. At some point, maybe not in my lifetime, but at some point in the future, that has to be given due consideration. So I think that, Dan's point is anything is on the table. And I think it behooves you all to sit down and think, you all have great insights into the needs of the town, and to sit down and say, okay, what kind of a deal can we make? Can we take that $1.5 million and combine with the Affordable Housing Trust, because they have input to it. Mm-hmm. They have input. The planning board has input. The ZBA, based on my understanding, has no input to it. So the ZBA is not involved in any of your discussions because it appears so that they want to protect the integrity of the ZBA. So if you say in your negotiations and you have the developer walk out of the room, that person goes to a ZBA that has no connection to what has been discussed.
Makes sense.
Then it's a whole new deal. So when we leave this room tonight, the onus is on all of you and the other departments to put it through. Mm-hmm. And hopefully you can do a deal that comes before the ZBA with a letter that says, hey, you're golden. Everything's in place. So I think that this has to be, there are a lot of details in here. But it's just the topical things, and we have had a number of LIPs. Flint Pond was a local initiative. Peters Way, that produced 10 houses and 2 affordable housing units. Flint Pond was 72 units in total, 18 affordable housing units. Dundee Acres, I haven't quite figured out where Dundee Acres is, but it had 8 houses and 2 affordable housing units. So we've had them in the past, but those are simple ones. Where somebody comes in and says, hey, look, I've got this piece of land, I want to put 10 houses on it. Now, even with that, you could say, we'll agree to 10 houses, but we want $25,000 on each house. So we want you to make a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust for $250,000. If they don't bite and then you say, okay, how about 125? You have that opportunity, which is unique, to have the opportunity to negotiate and legally negotiate a deal for the town that's going to be in the town's best interest.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else from ZBA wanted to comment? Yes.
Dan, can you just clarify what the ZBA's role is on a friendly 40B versus, I guess, a standard 40B or a more adversarial 40B?
Sure. The zoning board's role is actually the same. The zoning board is not involved in these negotiations with the selectmen, as Bill said. That's correct. So the zoning board just sits and waits until the 40B permit application is filed and runs through the public hearing the same way it would with a conventional 40B application.
Mr. McCusker?
Excuse me. So Dan, a lot of times when the ZBA is working on 40B, we start to address some issues, and just thinking one of the more recent ones was the amount of space that the buildings were taking on the lot made it really difficult to deal with issues perhaps of buffering around the neighbors. The overall appearance from the street as you know, as these buildings were seen. So we were able to negotiate small reductions in density, or be able to negotiate different things to try and address some of these issues. If, you know, if one of the negotiations the select board does is actually set the number of units for the density, then no longer can the ZBA use density as a way to try to get other things that it may want. Right? I mean,
Not exactly. So if the selectmen sign an agreement with the developer by which, say, the density of the project is 100 units, the developer can't go above 100, but the zoning board, through its permitting process, could impose a condition to make it fewer than 100 units. It could impose whatever conditions it wants, as long as they're justified, of course, and defensible. So the zoning board's hands are not tied whatsoever by whatever contract the selectmen sign. Really, it's the developer's hands that are tied, and the developer still has to go through the zoning process and still has to deal with the zoning board. And what's really nice about the town's leverage position today is that you will have the safe harbor. So once those 40R units are certified, I believe you have a 2-year safe harbor. So if you don't, if a developer doesn't work with you, the developer goes back to Mass Housing or some other agency, they might still get a project eligibility letter, but the zoning board doesn't have to approve it. So it really behooves developers in today's environment in Grafton to really work with the select board to come up with a project that everyone loves. And then it comes before the zoning board, and presumably the zoning board will love it too. So it's really up to the developer to come forward with a good project and to negotiate favorable terms.
thank you.
Any other questions? Going?
What's our time frame? Like, how long do we have to come up with a plan for what we're gonna want to negotiate and ask for? Do we know when the first developer is gonna be coming before us at all?
The first developer already came before.
And asked,
And
we
they
didn't
did not
negotiate.
file. They did not file an
Right.
application.
Right. So we don't have that timeline.
Yeah, so the developers that came forward have just presented conceptually, really informally. They just wanted to kind of bring the project and see, is this a hard no, or is this something that we can pursue starting the LIP process with the select board? My understanding is that those negotiations with the select board would be impending very soon. I think they're pretty close, but they may have some additional information that they want to pull together, and it's really on them when they want to come forward. What we can do is we can reach out to the developers and see if they have a timeline in mind that they'd like to present to the select board and start.
And since it is
think you're
negotiation, are we gonna try to do that in public session first and come up with what we would ask for? Or is that executive session because you don't want to tip your hand? How do we all get on the same page before we're looking in front of a developer?
If I'm understanding from Dan Hill and his description of the process, that would probably be the executive session that would take place.
Dan, is that what typically happens? We would go into a
Actually, what I would recommend is that you'd have a public meeting to listen to the application and the presentation. Perhaps invite the developer to come back at a future meeting, at which point you can discuss, the board can ask questions, the board members can raise concerns, and then I would take a vote in public meeting whether it's worth pursuing any further discussions with the applicant. And if the board collectively decides that it is, then I would recommend that you appoint a subcommittee of, say, 2 members to negotiate, to meet with the developer to see if there's a path forward, and to come back and report back to the full board as to the progress of those discussions. I actually don't think there's a viable exemption under the open meeting law to go into executive session for these negotiations, unless town land is involved or something like that. So I don't think you could. I don't think you could do executive session. It has to be in public session But like I said, I think you could definitely do a subcommittee of one or two, which doesn't constitute a quorum, and then have a meeting with the developer to discuss potential terms.
How do we authorize that subcommittee to negotiate for us? So how do we tell them this is what we're looking to achieve?
You would do that in the open meeting. So you would have, you can do this any way you want, but I think the way forward would be to have one public session to hear the application or the presentation, and then have another public session to talk about it. And then, at the end of that public session, if the board decides that it's worth pursuing, then you can have this open discussion over what kind of things each member wants to see. And then the subcommittee can then go off and have that discussion with the developer. Or staff could do it too.
You could appoint staff to do it, yeah.
And I think you could not tip your whole hand discussing it in the public session by doing it in generalities, right? So what are our main areas of concern? Are traffic, walkability and affordable housing, total units, or is it, you could each share what your general concerns are and then leave it to the subcommittee to figure out how to drill down on that and get what we, if traffic's a concern, is it we want traffic mitigation, so a stoplight or a whatever you're talking about. How do you do that, right? Is it through a HCA, MOU style process where it's just money? Like just, you give us money and we'll figure out how to mitigate those issues. Is it a donation of affordable housing, whatever that is? I think you could set your priorities and then turn your subcommittee loose on how to get to that end point.
And again, with that coming back to the board for final, approval from us, that's when the board finally gets to say whether, do we really like these terms and conditions or no, right? And that then would kick it off to that other process. So the question I wanted to know, and I didn't get an answer to, maybe I didn't hear it right, but on the whole timeline, so when a developer submits a LIP application, is there a clock in which the town needs to respond to? Like, is there set conditions of timing that we have the board to take action on that?
No, there's no. It's not like a typical application for a license or a permit. There's no. In fact, there may not even be an application per se. It just could be a presentation that the applicant makes, the developer makes. There's no time frame.
Okay.
And you can tell the applicant after one meeting, gee, we're just not interested. So you have complete discretion to do what you want with these applications.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Matt?
Just one question. Do we have any affordable units that currently have a local preference?
All of them.
All of them were?
I think every 40B we've done has included some amount of local
Has it?
preference.
Okay.
Yeah, that's standard going all the way back to Adams Road.
And it's CHAPA that sort of manages that part of the lottery process? How does that?
I think it's CHAPA. I think so.
Yeah, I think the lottery, typically the developer you would include that they have to meet, the condition would be that they have to meet the affordability, marketing, and lottery under their subsidizing agency, and they would choose which subsidizing agency they want to work with to fulfill the lottery process.
Okay.
And, I'll just say this. I mean, it's good to have the local preference. It is a struggle to find qualified purchasers. So when Hilltop was being built, the Pulte one, right, they were cranking through a lot of units.
Yep.
But we learned during that process that it took 3 people in the lottery to get one qualified buyer.
Got it.
So they'd have this long list of people that are in the lottery, but 2 out of 3 either couldn't come up with down payment or couldn't qualify for the loan, whatever it may be.
Yep.
It's and my understanding is that's continued from talking to other consultants and all, and Dan may know as well, but it's a struggle to find buyers, believe it or not.
So that's interesting. Not to go off on a total tangent, but I'm gonna a little bit. The down payment. So the housing trust could potentially subsidize down payments, right, to get more Grafton residents to qualify.
I don't know. I do know that at Hilltop, I believe, we actually made the developer, and God, I hope he still do or was doing this, was supposed to be kicking in some money towards the down payment or towards or giving money back at closing or something.
Yep. Okay.
You know, so I know we did that. I think I said Hilltop, I meant High Point, which is Adams Road. You know, so we've done things like that in the past, and I would think maybe you could do something like that.
Okay. So I think that is in the housing production plan in terms of one of the things that the trust could do.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have. But that'd be interesting to just get more qualified candidates actually from town.
Even better than using trust money, you could negotiate with the developer that the developer has to do that. I mean, one of the problem that Bill McCusker is describing is that with most 40B projects, the affordable units are set aside for a relatively narrow window of affordability. It's 70 to 80% of the area median income. So we've got thousands and thousands of affordable 40B units in the state. And there's only so many people at that income level. So there's actually a glut of affordable units around the state because unfortunately the 40B program doesn't have a broad range of affordability. So that's something that you could negotiate. You could say, hey, we want some units at 50% of median income.
Yeah.
We want some units at 100% of median income.
Yeah.
So the lit process could be a
Definitely
vehicle for
let's do
that, for
that.
sure. Yeah, okay. Bill, did you want to say?
Yeah, your point on your earlier question, I think of Dan, in negotiating with the developer, is it a reasonable length of time? In other words, there's a reasonableness equation, part of that equation. So there isn't a specified period of time, but it's got to be reasonable negotiations, you know, availability, you know, so you don't drag it out, because that developer at any time can go off into the sunset. And then, you know, the 40B application takes, and it's a hostile, I shouldn't say hostile, but it's a non-friendly 40B at that point. I have one other question. Dan, you mentioned safe harbor for 2 years. I know, and I've talked to Chris about this, that I know that the most recent report that I pulled today, and it's dated 11/3/21, it shows that we had 392 subsidized housing index units. And if you put Prentice Place on top of that, that's 40. Grafton Woods is 317. So that brings us up to 749. But these numbers were based on not the current, I think it was a 2020 census.
2010.
In other words, we're still waiting for the latest census numbers. Is that correct? On the upon which they base the affordable housing units and the subsidized housing inventory. Right now, you know, Grafton it was the 2010 census.
Right.
My question is, does the board even have to entertain a LIP proposal if we have safe harbor?
No, not at all. But it gives the town leverage,
Right.
but you don't have to entertain it at all. But keep in mind, yes, for the safe harbor, you're safe for 2 years. Even with Prentice, you might be over 10%, but that's again using the 2010 census. And I don't know how many new units were added, every unit, market rate units, affordable units. I don't know how many new homes were added to the inventory over the last 10 years. So when the 2020 census figures are published, which we're expecting in a few months, your denominator is likely to increase. And so you may not be over 10%, even with the Prentice Place units.
Which brings up an additional question, a thought. Fisherville Terrace is not in these numbers that I just mentioned, because Fisherville Terrace, there are 25 affordable housing units in that, and they can only be counted, and you can only solicit the state to include those units in your subsidized housing inventory after a building permit has been issued. All of the other projects that we have, it's when Candy gets that approval in the office, they can be counted at that point. There was some misconception in the past that we had to have building permits or occupancy permits. That is not the case. So the only exception to that is Fisherville Terrace, where they're building that now. Because that's been 10 years in the making, the requirement of the state is that that can only be counted, those 25 can only be counted when a building permit is issued, which has not been issued for that. They're developing the land, but as soon as that building permit is issued, those 25, because it's going to be 100 condo units in there, those are all purchased, so you can't count the 100, but you can count the 25. So that would bring that number up. And hopefully, Chris, and that number will be enough to offset the increase that's going to generate from the 2020 census data. And Dan, you said that you expect that to be out in a few months. Have you heard anything on that, Chris?
I have not at this time. I know that Candy's been working on the census data and that rollout, but
Because I went looking for that today, and I couldn't find anything on it.
So just short of following up real quick, getting some additional information out, is there any other questions in regards to the LIP process that you have?
Yeah, I think at one point Mr. Hill had said something about that there might not even be an application. So I guess I just wanted to circle back to Snow Road. They came in as like a feeler. Where does that put us in the process for them specifically?
so I think it's we can wait to hear from them, or if we'd like to reach out and which I'd probably recommend that we reach out and invite them back to present and have that public meeting as Dan Hill outlined and start that process. I think that would be the first step in moving these along.
Okay. Agreed.
Real quick, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the developer comes in and wants to do a lip, the select board really has, I think, maybe three choices. One is no, we're not interested. The second one is to say, yeah, we're interested in start negotiating. And then the third one is, well, I guess it's the second one is to give them the letter. That's ultimately what they want, is a letter saying we're on board with this. That letter presumably comes after negotiations. They create a memorandum of understanding or whatever, agreement. I guess through that process, if you're taking too long, the developer always has the option to just say, to heck with you guys, I'm just going to file a 40B application and be done with it. So I don't necessarily know there's any specific timeline. It's maybe more of the developer's timeline. How long does he want to play ball with you? Does he get tired of playing ball with you and just wants to go on his own? Or he thinks he sees benefits, so he keeps working with you? I think that's really kind of the timeline. There isn't a set one. It's really up to how long the developer wants to try and get your approval.
Right.
Or not.
No, that makes sense. And reaching out makes sense. So is that something that you guys would do? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Matt?
Just one last one. Sorry.
Well, one last one for you.
One last one for me.
Don't speak for everyone else.
So, there's been a lot of mention of safe harbor. Once we get into safe harbor, I mean, how are we expecting things to change? Like, I imagine things are going to change a lot for ZBA.
Well, we can right off the bat say no.
Yep. So,
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but no, we can say no. We can deny the permit.
so I guess, what should we expect? I mean, is it that you guys have more leverage for negotiations? I'd be interested in something like, you guys really crafted the Prentice Place development pretty significantly, right?
Yeah.
It took a lot of discussion and negotiation and all that. If we're in safe harbor, does that even happen?
I've never thought about it until you've just said it, and obviously thinking very quickly here, my gut tells me that if somebody came in with a traditional 40B, we would be inclined to say no, because we can, right? But if somebody came in with a lip, where basically the select board representing the town has said, we want to do this, presumably you got something for it, I would think that we would at that point be inclined to move forward with it. I would think. I mean, as an individual member, that would kind of be my thinking.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not asking
Yeah, no,
what
I
you're going to do
understand.
as a board, but
So,
it's just
I would
we're
think
at
it would
we're
work
at a
that way.
transition point. We've never really faced this, so
I know.
I'm
would
just
think
trying to
so.
figure out kind of what we're facing.
Dan, is what I'm saying kind of making sense? I mean, if I said anything that's kind of wouldn't be right.
No, you've hit the nail on the head, Bill. It's not, the zoning board can still issue 40B permits, even if it's not a lip. The board can always issue 40B permits. It just doesn't have to once the town is in safe harbor or over 10%. And yeah, if a project comes in and really advances the town's objectives on everything from open space to recreation to affordable housing, you name it, and it's a nice project, yeah, I mean, the board, it seems to me the board would probably be inclined to approve it if it addressed the local concerns. The ultimate balancing test for the zoning board under 40B is to balance the need for affordable housing against local concerns that are presented by the project. And so those local concerns are threats to the environment, public health, public safety, and planning. So if a project comes in and doesn't impose any impacts on those four things, and it produces affordable housing that the town needs, such as what Bill described, senior housing or housing at 50% of median income, then it would seem likely that the zoning board would want to approve something like that.
So I guess I'm really concerned about that. How do we continue pursuing affordable housing? Because we just talked about all the homes that were created for families. That was all under 40B. So how do we move forward?
I think it's through the lip process. I think once we're in safe harbor, once we get to that 10%, now we're in a much better position to continue to pursue these good projects.
So we probably want to go to that kind of host agreement idea where we would have a more broad-based.
Well, the host agreement is the
What's the
MOU.
lip?
But it would be more of a generic one, I think.
You mean like a starting point HCA for
Yeah.
any project that comes in? Here's
Exactly.
the minimum minimum things we're going to look for.
Yep. Because otherwise they're just going with sort of a special permit through the planning board, right?
No, they still have to negotiate the lip, because if they go through they still have to negotiate. Let's keep using HCA verbiage for example. They come before the select board to do a lip. Select board says no, or takes too long. The developer says, okay, I'm going to go to the ZBA under a different process. ZBA is not inclined to say yes, because there is no other side of the coin where we're getting something beyond just the affordable housing units. So if you're looking at it from the mitigation of what these units mean for the community, and I'm not saying that creating affordable housing has a negative impact. What I'm saying is it's more people, it's more infrastructure, it's same thing with any other thing. But now, once you're in safe harbor, if everything's pretty much following the lip process, you have that other side of the coin to say, that's great, 300 units, we love affordable housing here in Grafton, that sounds good to me. But at the same time, those people are going to need to exit onto 122, and how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by collecting some kind of fee, however you deem to structure that, and we're going to use that to put in a traffic light or mitigate it, however you choose to do that. But I think that what they're saying is that the ZBA would likely be pushing that stuff or inclined to say no. So really, the lip process becomes the only process for affordable housing.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Bill? You just mentioned if the lip process drives the objectives of the town that you all feel are important objectives, then obviously the ZBA is going to look at that and understand that. But the ZBA still has the right to vote that down if they, and the developer would also, know that. So it's, I think it's a great opportunity and a unique opportunity, and I think of, somebody mentioned the sidewalks, and Bill can attest to this, and, Brian, I shouldn't say demanded, but we requested at Prentice Place, there's some off-site requirements there, that when you come out of Prentice Place, you're gonna walk down a sidewalk to a crosswalk to perhaps more safely negotiate a walk over to the park. And that was something that we spent quite a bit of time on, because that's an expensive, get.
Absolutely.
And that was something that we had a condition on that, and it wasn't, he didn't oppose it, but, we said that, and we wanted sewerage. And, those are the points in the negotiation, but all of those things could be pre-negotiated on this side and with the developer, and it comes in, and we're sitting there saying, okay, you got that letter of endorsement, and it's a whole different ballgame. The state bylaws still have to be met with groundwater. All of those conditions, it doesn't eliminate those, but it is a much smoother operation.
And just to kind of build on this too, I know like that LIP process, our Affordable Housing Trust has an integral role in this as well. They weigh in on these projects and make sure, like, is Grafton meeting its affordable housing needs? Is it meeting the certain conditions and so on and so forth? So I do believe, that's a crucial step for us before they come to us. Like, have you gone and spoken to them? Have they reviewed your plan? Does it meet our affordable housing guidelines? And then, we have that group to really kind of review that. Like, that's an ongoing thing. I think that would happen if we reach safe harbor, that they would be instrumental in.
Yeah, it's just not, I think, really part of our process right now, so it needs to become part of the process. And, we talked about this in supporting, the housing trust and whatnot. We need the developers to be going to them first, and I think that's actually in that 52-page document.
It is.
That's described that their first step is to the housing trust.
Should we have the housing trust or send them an email and ask them what are things they would like to see us possibly negotiate on their behalf in the LIP? Or is that,
I think they get a chance at that, Colleen. I think they actually get to weigh in on part of that process.
So we're meeting on
And they're
Thursday, and I'm happy to.
yeah,
Ask.
so a developer
Great.
would have to negotiate with the Affordable Housing Trust and the Select Board as part of the LIP process?
They don't negotiate with the housing trust, but obviously the housing trust would have its
No, so
opinion.
I think,
Influence, yep.
and anybody tell me I'm off base, but
Right now?
yeah,
You're way off base.
I know, I know. I'm on fumes right now. So I think that the mechanism is the Affordable Housing Trust gets the presentation, and the Affordable Housing Trust can then make recommendations to the Select Board that the Select Board can consider in its negotiation.
Sure.
I don't think any of it. It doesn't appear, even when you read this document, that it's a Affordable Housing Trust is doing the negotiation, or they're putting conditions on it. They're giving you suggested conditions that you may want to.
Guidance.
Yep, guidance is a better way to put that, of how to get to where the Affordable Housing Trust sees that we need to be. And you're going to take that one step further and say, yep, we're trying to meet these affordable housing goals, but we also have public safety, public infrastructure, blah, so on and so forth.
So when Chris said he was gonna reach out to them to come back and present, they're not presenting to us, they're presenting to the trust. Or do we have them present twice? I don't wanna waste people's time either.
No, I didn't get that far.
So
I think what I would recommend is we can invite them to present to the trust, and then and at the same time invite them to present to the select board, but probably after meet with the Affordable Housing Trust first, and then come to the select board, and that'll give the trust time to provide some recommendations.
It's clearly like on page 7 of this document that's 15 years old that I think they should probably consider updating. It's a suggestion to the trust. I'm not telling them how to do this, but it does say letter of support from Grafton Select Board and Grafton Housing Trust. You know what I mean? Like there is those joint letters of support that need to be as part of the process. So,
And that's part of the process that we've been trying to fix and understand as well. So I think, you know, in the future, we would have a developer go to the Affordable Housing Trust first and then come before the board for the first time. But we've already, you know, the ball's already rolling. So if they went in front of the Affordable Housing Trust, Select Board's interested in meeting with you again. My understanding from this conversation is that second meeting would then be, we would have conditions, we would have questions, concerns, we would talk through it, and that, as Mr. Hill had pointed out, that's when we would have a subcommittee be, if we were still interested at that point, we would develop a subcommittee to go over those negotiations with the developer. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just real quick, to Ms. Roy's concern about multiple presentations, developer's gonna be making multiple presentations. And, you know, each step it could change. The Affordable Housing Trust may turn around and say, we don't like this, change this and that.
Yep.
If it comes different, then it goes to you guys. Comes to us, they still have to go to Concom, you know, so there's, in every step along the way, it could change, so.
Yeah.
It's just part of the process.
But as far as our negotiating, before they say, I'm sick of this, that's what I was kinda,
Oh, well, yeah, I suppose, but
yeah.
still has to be.
And again, if we're doing this in the context of safe harbor,
Right.
they can do that, but then no dice.
Right.
So
Right.
you once you hit that safe harbor, the ball is truly in the select board's court of how that's going to play out.
Yep.
I'll be drunk with that.
Dan, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm good.
I have a question of Dan. Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please.
Dan, is it in the purview of the select board to change the 80% down to 50% in the negotiations with the developer?
Yeah, absolutely. The
Well-
board can negotiate the affordability levels. You can negotiate anything.
So the change from 80 to 50 would make it more open for the affordability aspect of it.
Yep.
So that could be a condition that, and that combined with a local option could be a condition that is much more favorable to more people in the town who are seeking an affordable housing condition, whereas right now,
It's harder.
yeah.
I agree.
And I think this is something that, Matt, if you brought back to discussion to the Affordable Housing Trust too, I would be very interested in the input of conditions, including that.
Yep.
From them, just so our board has an understanding of, you know, what they'd like to see and what aligns with, you know, the plans of the trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chris. Go.
So I just, and I may be wrong, but my understanding of the 80% versus the 50%, and I just want to clarify, when regulating that, so in terms of getting on the subsidized housing inventory, you can set it at 80% or below, and that's the maximum threshold, which would include the 50%. I believe by limiting it, dropping it down to 50%, you could be actually reducing the pool that would apply to. You want to keep it at 80% or below. You may want to keep the threshold for ownership units. I would recommend for rentals that it would be 80% or below. That there's no minimum income, but simply at the 80%.
I see your point. Yeah.
That's an important point.
So really what we're trying to do is trying to open the pool to more applicants. That's
yeah,
the goal.
And I would recommend the
Yeah.
widest of 80% or
Yeah.
below, which means that it's just up to the 80%.
And looking at those other conditions, even Matt suggested, I think you guys have suggested too, is that, you know, we work with the builders to see about offsetting or crediting back closing costs at the end of
Yeah.
the process.
Yep, I think it's,
So there's some really unique opportunities we have, and I'm really glad we had this discussion. This was very, very important, because I think this does shape policies going forward with this town. All right, does anyone have anything else?
Just one last thing. So,
Wait a minute, you already had your.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
We're all calling
I
it
know I'm
out.
gonna keep
Maybe one
going.
last thing.
So the 80% or below is for rental, but for ownership units, we might want to pursue 50%.
Well, I was saying you may want to pursue that ratio that they were talking about of the 70 to 80% or 50 to 80% to make sure that there's a minimum income. You may not. I mean, that'll be up to the select board.
Okay.
I think
But if that's
the point is that has to be explored fully, so we all understand it, so you all understand it.
Yep.
But with the goal of, that you just mentioned, is to open it up to more people in town with preference for the affordable units.
Yeah.
And if we accomplish that, then your kids, will have the opportunity perhaps to continue to live in the town that they were born in. Because it's highly unlikely today, as you look down the road, and, we're gonna have people carpooling to go to dinner because of the cost of gas.
So there's not enough parking, Bill.
But we can park in front of Ray's house
Sure you
and
can.
walk down.
Knock yourself out.
Peter, you've been awfully quiet.
Just be prepared. You sound like you're in the grocery store going down with your cart and putting a sidewalk in and putting all these bennies in. You're gonna hear the term uneconomic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Probably. I agree.
I think Flint Pond, and Bill, you'll be the only one that knows. When we did Flint Pond, we tried to get a sidewalk, and that was a lip. We couldn't get anything.
Right, no, you're right.
So, and I realized Prentice Place, but that's so close to Nelson. How could anybody say no to that?
Right.
But
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Right.
somebody mentioned a stoplight at a certain street. State will never allow it. So, I mean, you could try, but, and if the developer was smart, he'd say, yeah, I'll give it to you, because the state won't allow it, because there's one 500 feet away. So,
Yep.
we couldn't get a street light at Brigham Hill Road for the school.
Right, I remember that.
They said
put the high
we
school.
wouldn't, they'd never allow that,
Right.
because of the one at the lake.
Yep.
So a lot of it sounds good, but in reality, and the neighbors haven't come yet. And I've been through it. And you're sicking the neighbors for the first hearing on the Affordable Housing Trust, and I don't know if that's fair.
Well, I know
Well, we're getting good at it. The whole public input process.
Yeah.
it can only get better from here.
Yes.
Right.
And one last question, the term developers, how many lips or 40Bs are in the works?
You've got potential 3.
Three.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
With 2 developers.
I'm sorry, Chris, did you have your hand?
I was just gonna say, in terms of the uneconomic, I think that is, economics certainly are gonna come into play here. And the ZBA has the opportunity to request a pro forma, which would be peer reviewed. I imagine, and Dan Hill, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the ZBA then the select board during this LIP process could ask for a similar pro forma review if the developer, they're not behooven to provide it, but that certainly could be an ask, and I certainly think that if that then went to a conventional 40B, the ZBA would at that point ask for it as well anyway.
Dan alluded to this at the beginning. The ZBA has to be conscious of the economics, because if we put a condition on something that makes the project uneconomic, then HAC will overturn that. Okay, that's the basis of the appeals at HAC of our conditions is the economics. So we have to be very conscious of that. You guys don't, all right? Because you're just negotiating with developers. So, you don't have, obviously the developer is going to be conscious of it because it's his money, but you don't have to be as conscious of the economics as we do.
There's no appeal process.
There is no
for that.
appeal process.
But there is through the 40B
Exactly.
process through you.
Exactly.
Right.
So we have to be conscious of it, and we are. You guys can do whatever you want and whatever he wants. So it's not quite as incumbent on you.
Okay.
If you ask for too little, you'll get nothing. If you ask for too much, you might get half of it.
Yep.
It's fair.
The, one last,
You already had your last two.
You'll never hear me say one last.
Is this the
Let's
last?
get her.
One last.
Yeah,
no,
right.
it's on the safe haven, isn't there a formula
Every time I think
for
it's over.
the number of units in a particular number of years?
Yes, so the I believe for Grafton, it's based off of the census data, the year-round housing units. I believe ours is 36 for 1 year, or double that and it's 2 years, over no matter how much you go over the, so,
So with Prentice Place, with that 40, we're already in it. Correct?
Well, Prentice Place can be counted as Grafton Woods can be counted because it's Grafton Woods over by the train station. Once it's
got
approved by the planning board in a 40R and it's filed, those are, you can,
Those ones count.
pardon?
They go towards, they count.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah,
they file with the clerk's office, yep.
the units that are created, when Chris asked for those to be included, they can be included, so, I'm hopeful that we have reached the full 10%. And again, we won't know until you get the 20 census data, the 2020 census.
But I don't think we need that.
No,
Well,
but
I think
that,
the piece you're missing, Peter, is the certification process is there's quite a bit to it. And Chris has been working that certification process. So it's not as simple as, hey, Prentice has a building permit, now we get 40 units. There's a process, and Chris has been working it for over a year now, or I'd say, to get him certified. So that's the problem.
Okay.
Almost there.
and when we had a discussion a while back, Chris, there is a look back on the Department of Housing and Urban Development, whatever it's called, that's in process. So, there's a look back on that too. In other words, what is the date of that being accepted?
yeah, so my understanding, and I know we had added some, I believe it was, I don't know if it was all the Prentice Place, I have to look back at, from our initial years, what we added to the SHI. I don't believe we met the 36 units, I think we just added a portion of those projects, but they should be included. But once the SHI is met, once you've increased by that amount, you then request certification for the housing production plan, which is what grants the safe harbor. And my understanding is that's backwards. So DHCD reviews that and issues a letter that it's effective and certified, and the effective date is set backwards to when you requested it. So it negates the time that they took to review it, essentially.
I see. Okay. All right. I think that kind of covers it. I think we're in a better spot. We appreciate all the input. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Dan, thank you very much for the insight. It's been very helpful. It's great to see you again.
Sure, anytime.
Yeah, and I think that's it.
So we're gonna need a motion to adjourn, but do you have, does somebody know, do we have any members on
Yes, you do.
the Zoom?
You have one member on the Zoom.
Hi, everyone. Matali here.
Matali, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
So we're gonna need to do a motion, but then it'll have to be a roll call vote. So I move to adjourn the ZBA meeting.
Second.
Okay. Matali, how do you vote?
Yes.
Peter?
You have to appoint me first.
Tom?
Yeah, he's
Appoint you
an
as a
alternate.
voting member.
Yes.
Oh, should I be appointed then too?
Oh, yes.
Maybe you can
Appoint
do this
you
out in
as
the
a
hall.
voting member.
How's that?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
everybody.
Thank
night,
you.
guys.
See ya.
One bottle meeting.
I know, just one.
good.
Jeez, it's amazing.
How are you holding up?
Oh, I'm
You're
crushing it.
you're crushing that.
Yep.
All right. All right. One last thing.
Yeah.
I got one
I only have one pen, but I'll throw it.
I'll give you another.
Oh,
There's a whole bin right there for you. We got plenty.
5 more things. No, what do you
All right.
No,
Phenomenal.
No,
no,
it's amazing.
it
Was it amazing?
amazing?
It's amazing.
anyways.
All right. So next up on our agenda, we have resignation retirement for sealer and weights and measures. Do I have a motion?
I move the board vote to acknowledge and accept the retirement notification from Edward Seidler, the town's sealer of weights and measures, effective February 28th, 2022.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, because we're all present, I'll take a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. That motion carried, unanimous. Love it. All right. We don't have any we have no appointments for select board tonight. We do have an
Chris, you going home now?
Thank you, Chris.
He's going back to his apartment.
Got a nice cot under his desk.
Yeah.
Little blanket,
I would
teddy bear.
hope so.
Good to go.
George
Should not
Costanza.
be hearing this. Not gonna happen.
All right. We have an appointment tonight for Grafton Public Library. I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to affirm the town administrator's appointment of Sarah Slocum as teen library and Katie Kozlowskis as the reference librarian.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Welcome to Grafton, Kate. Hearing no other, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Clear, motion carried unanimous. I have one more.
I think you did them both at
He
the same
did.
time.
You only welcomed Kate though, so welcome, Sarah.
Welcome, Sarah.
Sarah, yes.
Sorry, Sarah. I was looking at the next part of my agenda. Welcome, Sarah. There we go. Thank you.
Not that we're trying to move things along.
Yeah, so in front of you tonight, we have the TA final evaluation form. This was based on the vote that we took draft back a few weeks back. I want to thank William for putting it together and formatting it for us so it looks very nice and neat. Fonts are all the same and so on and so forth. But just wanted to have the board to review it one last time. I don't think we need to take another vote, but just, I know it's under new business, but anyway, anyone have any questions or comments?
I think we should vote to accept it.
Do you want to vote to accept the final? I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion, we accept the town administrator annual evaluation dated February 1st, 2022 as presented.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Just want to thank William again for the
Yeah, thank
nice
you,
job.
William.
Thank you.
For taking all my unformatted Word docs and making it look nice.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Pagination is a true passion of mine.
He only complained
You
about
said
it
that
for like 3
convincingly
days.
too.
I know I did.
You did really well. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Declare motion carried unanimous. Thanks. Next up, I know this was something that we said we'd bring in a future meeting agenda, but I wanted the board just to have another opportunity to look at the TA evaluation form. I'll be honest with you, seeing how I'm really not gonna be here to
Yeah.
do another evaluation for Mr. Broussard. I hope you don't
No, Priscilla's
feel
out.
sad, but I think that the three of you might want to just review this to see one last time. I gave you a printout copy.
Yep.
Right there. Just review it, and any changes that need to be made for it, we can give it to William because he's really good at this formatting thing.
It's his passion.
It's a passion of mine.
It's his passion.
I can't wait for that sticker to end up on my door.
It's gonna be cricketed.
Any comments? From the board?
Everybody's
Yeah,
a little
so,
punchy right now, right?
It's amazing, isn't it? So we're
It is
gonna
amazing.
go over this form now and talk about things we want to change, like 1 through 5 instead of 1 through 3 got changed. One of the questions on here was something that we wanted to possibly remove about, you know, how does he hand out resources to employees, something like that. I forget what it was.
Resources?
Something like that.
And I think,
Number 8? Oh, no, that's exercise. Good.
yeah. And also, again, like Peter, this really should be between three of you. But as a reminder, you also wanted to incorporate staff comments within this document.
Which you can see in at least one person's
Yes,
review very
so
clearly.
just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, so could we add that here?
So there's a.
You got it. It's right there,
section
department head
at the
feedback.
end. Yep.
Handled.
Got it, everything.
Done.
Yep, my only concerns were about some of the questions that I just am not sure that I'm ever gonna be able to give an informed rating on. Things like displays flexibility in the day-to-day performance of job and duties.
He's extremely flexible.
So
Pulled a hammy trying to put my shoes on this morning.
this is a great set of questions, but I don't observe Evan in his day-to-day job flexibility or inflexibility, as it may be. So there was a couple of questions like that I just thought it's not really the board's role to be evaluating his, flexibility of his day to day. It's more the outward stuff, I think, that's more observable by us and that we can actually provide legitimate feedback on.
I would give him a 1 on that.
I was gonna say, you just give me a 5. You could also, and I know it's my evaluation, but I'll weigh in anyways. Colleen's back, everything's off. So you could also glean the answer to that question when you're doing the department head conversation.
Glean.
Wow. Or I guess the other thing is
I
we
know.
can just.
I gotta write that down.
We can not
Pulled that
answer.
out of nowhere.
So I like that we put in explicit instructions that said, if it's an unanswered, it just becomes a 3, which kind of doesn't skew things, I guess.
Depends on how the rest of
So
it's going.
I know I had brought up before about, it doesn't meet expectations, sometimes meets expectations, sometimes exceeds and constantly exceeds or consistently exceeds. And it's up to the board, but I'd like to see those definitions on 1 through 5.
Oh, well, 1, 3, and 5 are defined right here. So,
I completely agree with what you just said.
Yeah, because
Those
because
exact ones.
because we should have expectations of what you do and how you do it, and that's how we should put it in here. So 3 is he meets expectations. 4 is he sometimes exceeds. 5 is he's God. But
oh, it's a big 5.
You never hand out A's, do you?
I don't.
No.
No. Sometimes I do.
I get that feeling.
Hey, I didn't get him in school, so I don't give him.
Grading on the bell card.
No, but is that okay? It's the expectations that we have of the town administrator in these areas.
Yeah, it seems to come up each time where we all get confused about it, so having it completely described seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
So I liked the language that you just said.
Did you get that, Will?
I did.
So we're good.
So glean that onto your piece of paper.
Well, actually, I just made a note of the timestamp for when you said it, and I'll just go watch the video tomorrow.
Do the same thing.
Oh God.
If I may make an observation, I think you all should include in the instructions is, with Evan's suggestion of this fast evaluation with interviewing, 1 or 2 department heads, I think that may be something that you may want to put in the instructions about how that gets done, how that gets applied. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Evan tells us who to interview.
He says, talk to this one. Oh, don't talk to that one.
Is that the process I take a card?
I think that's a good idea, just mentioning just a quick statement that the chair will randomly assign department heads to members to meet with. That makes sense.
Yeah, so we don't pick them.
I would also recommend you lengthen the time frame of doing this. So if there's a question that comes up that you say, yeah, I really don't know about, his flexibility with staff or what he does, that you actually have time to maybe work through that instead of saying like,
And look into it.
instead of saying like, oh, I have a week to get this evaluation done.
Sure.
And so it's, it's a more credible evaluation, obviously, but it's also his career. So if instead of just saying like, well, I'm going to give a 3 because I don't really know what how to answer this question, because I feel like it was I wish I had a little more time to dig in, so or make some more phone calls or whatnot. So just a suggestion, maybe give yourself 2 weeks.
Put it in the calendar. So
Put it in the
we have
calendar.
time. Okay. I love that calendar. I can't wait to see it.
It's got like 4 things in it.
I know. You're gonna.
Pump the brakes.
I cannot.
I barely got here.
Take
today.
a chill pill.
I do not have that set.
I asked the school committee not to send me back down here. I'm like, I just stay up here.
Ask me more questions, please.
Well, I wanted to go up and support you, as chair.
You should. It was a great time up there.
We would have just closed this meeting and gone up and found you.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So I think that's some feedback for Will. Will, you'll just draft something up and Do you want to see this come back again at the next meeting, like finished, so you guys review it one more time and?
Can we just agree that our
Yeah,
amendments
totally-
are good?
Yeah.
Then I make a motion, we accept the updated town administrator evaluation form as amended in discussion.
Second.
Motion made second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimous. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Moving on to ARPA funding allocation. I'll give you the floor.
Sure. Thank you. So we, Peter and I, met with the ARPA committee on February 28th to, one, further our work with that committee, but two, talk about some projects that we felt are of a more dire need or something that should be happening sooner rather than later. We did that in a number of ways through the capital plan and conversations we had around that, as well as through the operational budget and looking for ways in which ARPA could be used to offset some of our costs. While being mindful that we're not using this money to fund operational costs that exceed the time frame in which you have to spend the ARPA money, which is 2024. So we came up with a number of projects that the board or the committee chose to vote on that evening to send to the select board for consideration. The first of which is Grafton Middle School HVAC replacement and upgrade. So as we were looking at things that we were going to have to fund in this fiscal year, which would have an impact on the taxpayers, the biggest thing was this HVAC replacement project. It's a $2.5 million project. We have thus far received, I believe it's $288,000 in grant and earmark money to offset the cost of this project. And given the instability of this system over this winter, we wanted to try to kickstart this process early spring so that we could have an implementation for summer when the kids aren't in school. Also being mindful of supply chain disruption and other things that we've been seeing. You know, some of these projects that have a computer board in them are taking, 8 times as long as they did in the past. So we wanted to make sure that we brought that to the forefront.
So on that note,
Yeah.
Kevin, and because some of this stuff, construction-wise, I deal with every day.
Mhm.
So if you wanted to do this project over the summer, you would have had to order this stuff probably in August of last year. They're 20 to 24 weeks out on HVAC equipment.
Okay.
And I don't know where the $2.5 million came from or how that was produced.
So we are working with Train. They are our ESCO provider. So it's an energy service contract,
Yep.
And that's under a 25A procurement. So basically, it's design build. So we can go to Train and say we need to redo this HVAC. They come in, they develop the whole plan. That doesn't cost us anything out of pocket, and then you offset some of your costs with the energy savings. So that's where the $2.5 million.
But this still has to go through 30B and
It will still have to go to bid and all that.
so
stuff, yeah.
is there any way to put this out to bid shortly? Knowing that you're not gonna expend any money because it's all gonna be on order.
Right. So in working with the Train people, the reason we kept this project at $2.5 million, even though we're getting other offset costs, is for contingency, knowing that these prices are volatile.
Yep.
And we're likely to see some fluctuation there.
So it's not only the equipment,
Yep.
okay, that's out 20 to 24 weeks right now. It's also ductwork
Yeah.
and it's controls.
Yep.
So you can have, and there's projects out there right now that have the rooftop unit sitting on there.
Mhm.
No ductwork, no controls, no nothing. And then there's others that have controls, ductwork, and the rooftop units have no idea.
Right.
Just for an example, I ordered a 350 kW generator last April. It's coming tomorrow. I mean, It's crazy out there. So if this is a plan to do it over the summer while the school is closed, then you need to get it out to bid.
ASAP.
Yeah,
Yep.
right away.
Train worked on, was it the elementary school? I
That-
think
I-
That was
I don't
Honeywell.
have-
Honeywell.
That was
that
Honeywell.
was Honeywell.
Train was gonna come.
Honeywell did this
Yeah,
Oh,
Honeywell
this
did, yeah.
building, okay, okay. I just,
So-
I ask because I don't know if they're on a state bid list where
So-
you don't have to go through 30B?
There are different provisions depending on, and I do not know all of the ins and outs of, I mean, this is the school department's project, so I'm
Right.
the cheerleader in this capacity. When I have done an ESCO in the past, because it was design build, I didn't go out to bid for any of those projects. However, there are some instances where you would have to do that, and I'm not sure that how they've structured this
Okay.
in this particular case. I can certainly find that out and get back to you. Either way, we have to stay within the law.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
so.
like, yeah.
And the
Which
issue
we'll
is
do.
that if you go into the next school year and you don't have equipment there, you're gonna be going into the winter and you're not gonna be able to do it then.
Right.
So.
Right.
It's gonna increase and increase, so.
I agree.
It's really a bad, roofing is even worse.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
But we gotta do it.
Once we vote to approve this, it just goes. It doesn't have to go to town meeting, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Any other questions on that one, or can I move to the next one? Okay. So, I was looking.
I know you double looked at me like question.
I actually,
Okay.
what's the cost again of that?
2.5 million.
2.5, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
It's in this handout right there. that
Thank
have.
you.
So GPS nursing cost offset. So this is one of the things when we were doing the operational budget. There are increased nursing costs due to COVID-19 that the school has needed to incur and continues to incur, even though we look like we're in good shape today. We may not be in good shape in the fall. And so what we were looking to do is earmark some of these funds to offset the impact that GPS has in their budget, so that we could again cull that out and prolong the override, all those things we've been talking about. But this is just an earmark. So as we get closer to this time next year, it's probably an entirely different conversation. Jay feels comfortable right now that he's not going to need anywhere near that amount. But we just don't know. So as we get closer, when we have all these other projects that come to light through the public process, you could kick this money right back in to the, just you voting it doesn't give it to the schools and it's gone. It doesn't go into some other pot. It stays here as an earmark, and then we just take it off the list if it's not spent and put it into some other public project that we're trying to do. Yes.
Quick question: can it be nursing / like guidance counselor costs? Because I just imagine that could be a need too after the last couple of years we've had.
I don't know. I will find that out for you.
Just to earmark it to.
I don't know if they're looking. These were the things that the school gave us. So let me reach back out to Jay and I can drill down on that.
Okay.
Website enhancement and accessibility project. This is something that we had in our capital plan. However, totally eligible through ARPA, and it seemed like a great use of drop in the bucket, so to speak. I know it's $50,000, but this revamps the town's website, as we've been talking about for this entire year that I've been here, as well as it totally revamps the accessibility features of our website, so that the people with sight impairments, any impairment that is generally given consideration on a website, we would now be able to do. So mouse overs, it tells you what the picture is, all that stuff.
So do you feel like the 50,000 is enough? What's that based on?
That's our quote.
That's the quote we got from Civic Plus to completely redo the website with all the additional features that they're offering through their proprietary service.
Right. Okay.
We did look at other vendors, none of which were cost effective as Civic Plus was.
That seems a little light.
Well,
frankly.
the one of the reasons for that is, one, it's aimed at government bodies, and I think two, we've been a longstanding customer of theirs.
Correct.
And what was the third? They did something else with the data migration or something.
So they won't migrate the entirety of the website. which is okay because we have a massive sprawling website. We will pinpoint the important features and documents and things of that nature, and they'll bring 75% of them over. Essentially, the originals and no duplicates.
Okay.
And we can do our own migration, obviously, of other
And
things.
that's probably good.
It's real good.
We
'cause-
want to do some housekeeping.
Yeah, well,
I
that's
think it's
one of the
fantastic.
problems with our website is that, I can click in, I think, 3 or 4 different places to see town meeting information, and town meeting information is different in every single link.
Yep.
Different years, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I'm sure it made sense to whoever was doing it at the time, but
Maybe not.
But
You're
maybe
giving someone a lot of credit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's all over the place, and some of that we can just say abandoned in place. We create our new dashboard for all town meeting stuff, and all town meeting stuff lives in one spot.
Yeah.
Boom. So that's one of the projects. And one last thing, the MS4 stormwater permit compliance project. So this is something we've been working on. As you know, MS4 is a huge undertaking for all municipalities in the Commonwealth, around the country, really. MS4 is a federal stormwater regulation. So we need to do, it's a 2-part project, which will keep or reduce the levels of phosphorus in the Assabet watershed and not the Axtell. What was the other one, Peter?
Misco.
Misco. Yeah, maybe.
Assabet, Blackstone, were the 2 main.
Yeah, it wasn't the
Quinsigamond?
Blackstone. Well, the Quinsigamond.
Quinsigamond.
So it's the Assabet and the Quinsigamond. And so it's a large project. And what we're looking to do is actually split that funding up. So $120,000 is already in the operational budget for this year. $50,000 is in the operational budget for the sewer department, and we would be looking for $150,000 out of ARPA to get that project to completion. And those were what we discussed the other night.
So it's a balance.
$3.3 million is what we're looking to allocate,
Yes.
with a balance of $2.2 million that would then go on to the public process that we are currently in the works to develop, which would be it's public outreach, it's surveys, and other, I don't know, things we'll come up with along the way, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much the 2 prongs of that.
And the ARPA committee voted, like you said, on this. And
Correct.
Great.
So good at spending money.
All right. So I guess tonight we
Thank
need
you.
a motion.
Good.
Just from the board to approving this memo on the American Rescue Plan Act for the date of February 28, 2022.
Sure. So I motion we accept the ARPA committee's recommendations, releasing $3.3 million of the ARPA funds received for Grafton as presented.
Second.
Motion made a second. Any discussion on the motion? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Clear. Motion carried unanimous. Thank you very much. All right. Next up, select board reports. Does anyone have anything? Who wants to go first? Anybody?
Fire Chief Search Committee met, but it was an executive session, so I can't tell you anything else.
Great update, Colleen.
Thanks for
If
that.
you did, you'd have to kill us.
Exactly.
All right. I just want to say last week I got to participate in Community Reading Day. It was a lot of fun. I want to thank the North Street Elementary School for being such wonderful hosts.
North Street.
North Street. I went to North Grafton Elementary School first, so I show up there and it's like,
Without a book?
oh, I always show up with a book. I let them tell me the book they want me to read. Are you kidding
I'd
me?
like
Books
to-
I want to read to these kids. You think they have any interest in that? No.
I'd like to know what you read.
I read.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I'm sure I'm sure the kids remember it. That's all that matters.
I know what book I read. While Peter's thinking about that, I want to note that I also went to North Grafton Elementary School.
Yeah.
And do we know why?
Because Peter told you to.
Because I asked Peter the night before where I'm going. And I got there and I
I
was
see
like,
where the
"Whoa,
story's
this
going."
isn't the right spot, I could just tell. I read Sophia Valdez for Prez.
I read that my last time, but I think Rabbit for President was this one.
Okay, there you go.
Nice.
That was
So,
fun.
Rabbit for President or Duck for President?
Duck. I'm sorry, Duck for President.
Because it was part of the Duck Duck Moo series.
Yes.
A lot of candidates for president.
I feel like you know a lot about.
And by the way,
Oh,
in
Dr.
this
Clue
book,
was
there was
great.
a
Dr.
recount.
Clue,
Well read there.
There was recounts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Mine was about how you can't fight City Hall and how it's a horrible bureaucracy that spins you into the ground. I was like,
and my duck got to play the saxophone.
at least they had a
Night
Department of
shows.
Cheese in
So
this one.
It was really interesting. Anyway, it was really fun. Besides that, I told last week we had the ARPA committee meeting a few weeks ago. We have one scheduled for the 21st of
Yes,
this
I believe
month.
so.
We'll have some more guidance, by the way, on use of affordable housing purposes for ARPA. Just the consultants were reviewing, just for the rest of the board, now they were reviewing the structure of the Affordable Housing Trust and how it's set up today before they give an opinion. That's all I have. TA reports?
I was going to talk about Community Reading Day. We've already done that.
Tell me, what school did you go to first?
I went to. Yeah.
Shrewsbury High School.
Yeah, I was in Millbury for a while. I don't know. No, that was a great day. I really had a good time. That's a really
My granddaughter enjoyed it.
Oh, did she?
Yes.
Okay, good. My favorite part was that they gave me Sofia Valdez for Prez and told me to just pre-read it because there's a couple of Spanish parts in it. And then when I was talking to Chief Prepo, he's like, "Oh, good thing they give us these books in advance." They gave me a book in advance. I got here, they told me to read it, and by the way, some of it's in Spanish. No, it was a great time. It's a really cool program, and I would recommend. I mean, obviously, you would all do it. But it was really cool. We had a really nice time. And I started the FinCom budget process beyond just the initial presentation. So we had our first Saturday meeting with some department heads. All of that's doing great. I think your department heads are doing a great job. And I think it's really coming together well. So
Thank you.
pretty much all I had.
Next up, we have correspondence, just one from Governor Baker's office regarding Chapter 90 fund. Does anyone have any questions on that?
When do they get updates about who works here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll work on that.
That's going to be around for years. I guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so anyone have any questions on that? Okay. We don't have any further discussion. There's no meeting minutes yet tonight. We don't have any reason to go to executive session, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you
Night.
very much.